actually I'm to fill each week. I think it's reasonable. We've already had a seconder to it. Anybody else wish to speak, or shall we go straight to the vote on that? Yes.
Sorry, Chair. Again, I'd just like to reiterate the fact that I appreciate the challenges that you're coming and bringing to the Scrutiny Committee. However, I don't agree with the fact that they relate in any way, shape or form to the discretionary award scheme that we're actually discussing on this agenda item. So I'd ask Member Services just to consider whether this recommendation is relevant.
It's my opinion as Chair, and you're quite reasonable in a democracy to actually challenge that. Well, it's quite reasonable for me as Chair to put this to the meeting and for the members to decide as well. Where we're looking at the discretionary rebate scheme, we can welcome that. And this is what I want to do. And this is, in terms of the recommendation, is we welcome these measures, but Cabinet should consider writing to the government urging the refund, so it will be connected to the actual to the actual recommendation and to the actual what's before us this evening.
Chair, yeah, if you've got a seconder, then we need to go to the vote on that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Chair, I'm also, I don't see a direct connection here, and I just wonder whether the government might in fact even be at this moment through this scheme using revenues from the increased VAT, etc., from petrol to actually recycle into this scheme, because we have no evidence, we have no information here as to where the government has got this money, but they might have already got it from the source that you're suggesting. Well, so I feel we don't have enough information.
I think as far as my own constituents, they'll judge me by my actions, the way I vote on this. I just would urge other members to consider if they're going to vote against this, where we're trying to get help to those hard-pressed families. And I would seriously ask you to, because certainly if you do, then your constituents will be reminded of that, I'm afraid. Because this crisis is... I'll let you bring you back in. This crisis is so important. I think that we ought to be taking every opportunity. And if additional revenue is collected by the government because of these high prices, then those refunds should be made. Hardy will wish to come in. I'll bring you back in a second.
I mean, I think the connectivity for me is that if it's seconded and proposal seconded, it can be taken to a vote. But I think just to answer Lucy's point about do we know enough information, well, the government may or may not have used tax revenues coming in from all sorts of different sources. That's their job, to identify funds, and this is a welcome part of that, the council tax energy rebate. But as you say, Chair, we know events are moving fast. Cost of living and impact on families and individuals is getting worse and worse. And as the government previously had to consider going back on not wanting to put a levy on energy companies because they thought it was not the right thing to do, they were forced to consider that because of the worsening condition, cost of living condition. So I think welcoming this rebate, but also encouraging and proposing that the Cabinet put representation to government to increase the help for hard-pressed families and individuals in the city of Derby and beyond is really would be welcomed. And I think it's right for us to put that forward to the Cabinet on behalf of our residents, particularly those who are most challenged in terms of the cost of living increases, which are still going up, and they will go up even more in October, I understand.
Thank you. I couldn't have put it more succinctly and forcefully myself, Hardy, so well done for that. Right, okay. Lucy, before I go to the vote.
Yeah, 2 points, Chair. One is that the poorest people in our society are unlikely to have a car and be driving, and therefore will not have been impacted. It's true. Those who cannot afford a car tend to be the poorest in society, and they will be driving least. So the benefits, you need to work out where the benefit's going. The positive thing about what is in front of us at the moment is that this money is being targeted to those who are poorest off, those who are most likely to be in need of help. And this, therefore, I support this way of distributing funds rather than a blanket process. So if you're going to put a recommendation in about the recycling of petrol, additional petrol revenues, it also needs to encourage the use of that in a progressive manner rather than just as a blanket manner, because the other, I think, £400 is going back as a blanket manner. And people have said to me, why am I getting this money, both the 150 and the 400, because it's going to people who may not be in fuel poverty, who may have very fuel-efficient homes. And we need to ensure that any additional revenue that is going to be going to help people in poverty actually goes to the right people. And if it's not going to the right people, it should be going to improve the property of those who are most in need.
Are you suggesting an addendum to mine?
I can't remember the details of what you said. But
shall I read it to you again?
Yes, and we'll agree an addendum.
Executive Scrutiny welcomes this report and help on offer, but Executive Scrutiny also urges Cabinet to write to the Government urging it to refund all or part of the additional revenue to those hard-pressed families facing staggering increases in petrol and energy prices.
How do we identify the hard-pressed families who have bought petrol?
I think it's obvious. I think you only have to go out there. I mean, I think everybody is suffering, Lucy. I mean, I think you're done, with all due respect, I think you're done, Lucy, with all due respect, let me finish and I'll let you come back in. I think you're dancing on the head of a pin here. I mean, everybody's suffering by those prices, no matter, because you have a set budget. I mean, and in actual fact, I think you're, if I may say so, with all due respect, you are wrong. I think the poorest people who do need their cars to either see their relatives or get to work are probably suffering the worst from this. I think, and they're the ones that are being hit the hardest, because, okay, you and I might be able to just afford it, we're taking a hit, but the people who are earning not as much as you or I or other people are really suffering, and that's where that help's needed. You don't need to direct it, you just need to be a rebate. So I'm going to go to the vote on this now. So those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. I think that's passed. Thank you very much.
3 in favour,
okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any more comments on the energy rebate? John and then Lucy. Thank you.
Yeah, Alison, the discretionary element to this, is this the element that's, we're not exactly advertising the criteria for getting the payment? Is that am I right in thinking that's the case?
That's the household support scheme.
Okay.
This is the council tax, the discretionary council tax. We are transferring a small element from this scheme into the household support scheme that you're referring to, which we are not publicising the eligibility criteria for.
All right, I'll leave that in that
yeah,
case.
okay.
Right, thank you.
Lucy?
Chair, my question, I told you there'd be some questions coming, relates to that same portion that John's just mentioned, that the money that is unlikely to be allocated of around £100,000, which was looked to be going into the household support scheme. I was wondering how the funding, the money is flowing out of that household support scheme and how it matches the requests for funding from it.
Alison, could you help us, please?
Yeah. So I don't have the exact figures to hand, but I can get those for you. But I do know that we have allocated two processes to go into that scheme. One from referral from our partners, where we have already working with or identified vulnerable families. So there's a referral process in there, and there's also an application process into that scheme. Obviously, not all of the application processes meet the eligibility criteria or the validation process, but we have awarded all of the grants that we have awarded all of the grants. So we've distributed all the grant that we've received as a council. We don't have any unspent allocations. The grant was obviously overwhelmed with applications in the first phase last year. But we did manage to keep the grant scheme open until the end of March, where we made awards up until the end of March. So just to give Scrutiny some assurance that we aren't holding any funds back and we are allocating the full amount that we've received, although there will be applications that do come through that haven't met that eligibility criteria.
Thank you very much, Alison. Right,
May I-
you'd like to come back in? Okay, yeah, fine.
May I see if I've summarised this correctly? All the money we've got in that scheme at the moment has been distributed.
It was in the old scheme because it ran up until the end of March, so all that was distributed, and we do have a new scheme now, which we're running alongside an element of this scheme that runs up until, I think, until September. So that scheme's currently open.
Okay. Chair? Yeah, thank you. I note that what we as councillors, I'm sure, would all like to do is to take people out of fuel poverty so they don't need to come back year after year with the sticking plaster of asking for extra money. It's not something as an individual you want to do. You don't want to be there with a begging bowl. So what I'm suggesting, Chair, is that rather than offering a sticking plaster, we should use any excess money, and I'm thinking this approximately £100,000, which would otherwise go into the Household Support Fund, and use that to support the funding that we already have, and the scheme which we already have running, to insulate some of our poorest insulated homes in the city. And this is being used both for council properties and for particularly the private properties. And there's a scheme called the LAD 3 scheme, the Local Authority Delivery 3 scheme, on sustainable warmth. And it's short of money because the cost of doing schemes is greater than the cost of the amount of money that we originally requested. So this would enable more homes to be efficiently insulated so that people would not need to ask for help next year.
Matt, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment to Councillor Kerr. Wouldn't that conversation be best placed in the working partnership? There's a capital pot of money that's available to draw from. So for me, if they're short of money, it would seem that would be an ideal potential idea for that capital money to be allocated to. So I'm really not quite sure why that hasn't been raised.
Yeah, but Matt, I have to say, makes a fair point there. Alison, over to you. What are your views?
The grant conditions are very explicit that it is around payment to individual households to support energy payers, and they have defined a loose criteria to enable that payment to be made. So I understand what Councillor Kerr is saying, but I don't think it would be eligible under the grant conditions.
With all due respect, Lucy, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that it isn't that flexible for us to be able to do that with it. But there are issues about insulation that should and ought to be looked at, no doubt. I think we're all in agreement of that. We're aware of that. And I'm getting nods from around the room. And other officers here will, I'm sure, will feed that back, Lucy, into the system. I'll take you very quickly, so we've got a full agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, because the third point I wanted to raise is in the table that we have here of people who are likely to be eligible. And that relates to council tax support, not to, and council tax bans, and to disabled persons band reduction and severely mentally impaired and these sorts of units, not what the energy efficiency of the property is like. So Derby Homes is now producing building properties which are very close to zero carbon, that they have very low energy requirements. Some of these will be at the other end extreme. They will be have efficiencies of E, F, and G. But we're not distributing this against those needs and the likely needs of poverty to do with a household. Okay. And I think we should be targeting that as well. And I don't know, Chair, whether we would be able to pull in what EPC ratings we have knowledge about to make sure that we are targeting the funding at those who most need it, and because of the inefficiency of energy, the low energy efficiency of their properties, rather than just looking at the likely financial viability of that household.
I understand what you like to achieve, and I think the aims are laudable. I'll ask Alison how practical that is, and whether we can do that or not, or whether it's set. But I think for me, I'm a simpler man, I regard it simpler. I think the need is obvious for those people who are struggling with the heating bills, irrespective of how efficient their homes are. But over to you, Alison.
Thank you. I don't think we would have access to that information across the whole household sector, whether that's private or not, to be able to administer a scheme like that. I think it's credible and valid, but I just don't think we would have the data to be able to do that. And we have to be mindful that we want to get this money out as quickly as possible to those households that are in need of that money now.
Yeah, we understand exactly where you're coming from, Alison, and I think officers are taking on board wherever they can, try and target the money the best that they can, and the officers are nodding now, Lucy. We'll take that on board, and I think in other committees, I think it's right and proper we raise those things, but I think I'd like to draw a line under that for now. We take on board, officers have taken on board, as committee members have, the comments that have been made, and I think we ought to use those on other occasions so we can target wherever possible. Thank you very much for that, Alison. Moving on to climate change action plan. Who's taking us through that?
That's me, Chair.
Thank you.
If that's okay. This is the recommendations are to approve the draft action plan and delegate for amendment to the Chief Exec and Cabinet member as detailed on the report. And also the report explains that this action plan was one of a set of actions that was agreed at full council with the climate emergency back in 2019. And although we were already thinking about climate change, and Andy is certainly testament to that, and who you'll know very well, we have it's certainly mobilised our work in this area, which underpins a lot of this draft plan. Obviously, we had a bumpy ride through COVID, so I acknowledge and appreciate that it hasn't got to you as quickly as we might have hoped. But one of the things we have done in the intervening period, which I think is very important, is establish a Derby Climate Commission. So that's chaired by the university and has broad membership, including our own councillor climate champions, again, which was a development which came from that motion in 2019. Now that commission has 4 themes: transport, housing, business and community. And important to share that commission is developing a city-wide climate strategy, and we'll be seeing that later this year, and that will have its own supporting action plan. And I say that because it's really important for me to be clear that there's a difference between those 2 action plans. And the one for your approval today is around the City Council. So it's about us and what we do and the actions where we have a direct impact on our own carbon footprint and progress towards our own 2030 net carbon zero target. So it's the way we do things, changing the energy use in our buildings, providing clean transport choices for our employees, integrating annual mandatory training into your councillor training programme, standardising waste services for our buildings, and I think quite a profound change is a constitutional review which will embed the climate emergency into our constitution. Now, the Council, I accept and appreciate, has a very clear role as part of that city-wide strategy and supporting action plan. And this is where the things that we do as a council are guided by national and local policy and where it facilitates those key strategic drivers. And that would be areas like economic development, like strategic transport or health and social care. And it's those areas where we are place shapers that will feed into that city-wide plan, whereas this one is the City Council. At present, we don't really have the sophistication in our understanding of our carbon footprint, so our focus in this action plan is more direct, and that matches what we know about our carbon emissions at the present. Now, we've worked with APSI on this, and it covers our carbon footprint at the moment, as we understand it, covers scopes 1 and 2. And that's not exceptional. A lot of the local authority plans that you'll see out there actually just focus on those 2 scopes. And I'll just explain those a little bit. I appreciate that many of you will probably know what they are. But these 3 scopes is an accepted way of measuring carbon footprints. They were established through the Greenhouse Gas Protocol of 2001, and they're the basis for mandatory reporting in the UK. Now, scopes 1 and 2, which is, again, as I said, what we've based our carbon footprint on, is what we can directly influence. So things like running our fleet, the gas boilers, or what is indirectly produced on our behalf. So the electricity we buy, for instance. And we'll continue to work with APSI as we get more understanding and we get clever at this on that baseline, and when we'll start to integrate Scope 3. Now, Scope 3 emissions are much more difficult because this is where we are indirectly responsible, such as things like the goods we purchase, the way they travel, the way they get to us, the way they're sold, etc. But once we do that, that will help us understand that wider role and will really inform that bigger place-shaping role that we have. Of course, we're already doing lots of work to reduce our carbon emissions, insulating our homes, installing air source heat pumps, supporting smart meters, and getting our staff, as well as yourselves, trained in carbon literacy. And this action plan really focuses our work. So from the council motion, our small core climate team have also been working hard with our climate champions because, and I'll say this personally as an officer, for me it's really important that we do this in a cross-party way. This is such an important global issue, so it's really important that we in the team really work with you and have that cross-party engagement. And it is a journey. We haven't got everything buttoned down, and I'll readily admit that. It isn't perfect. But I guess I shouldn't expect it to be because this is very difficult stuff. This is really complex. So the theme the action plan in front of you has 4 themes: our assets, our processes, our place, and our culture. And it covers about 15 different areas. And we've agreed that we say in the report that we'd like to have 2 versions, one that we can use and communicate quite easily, and one, a sort of more messy one, that we can constantly review and change as we grow in our understanding, our skills and our knowledge. And there will be gaps, there are gaps, and we will try and continually try to close these. Certainly highways is one, highways and transport, and what we're trying to do there is, I think there are about, 15 or 16 different carbon models for infrastructure and highways out there at the moment. So what we want to do is partner with 2 or 3 similar sized authorities and work collaboratively on that and really embed that through our asset management processes. So as you can see, there is still work to be done. And what we've done in internal governance is establish 6 thematic groups, and they have a diverse set of people from across all our different services and disciplines, and they're looking at our processes and procedures, looking at the buy-in, hearts and minds, our energy efficiency, reconnecting with nature, and preparing our city. So again, I've talked about engaging our climate champions, and we have helped and worked through their ideas to make sure that they're influencing and shaping what we do. And as I've said, this is really difficult stuff, and there will always be places where we can be challenged to do more and do it more quickly. But we hope this action plan sets out our intentions, and we wanted it to be an honest document, and I hope that you receive it positively in that spirit. We know there are many competing demands on us as a council, and we're still finding out what a decarbonised organisation looks like and what those difficult decisions are going to be that we have to contemplate in the future. But and I think that's all I want to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Werner. Before I come to Lucy, any other who wish to raise any comments? Yeah, sure. And then Hardiel. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking through the actual forward plan, if you like, or the climate change action plan. A lot of these, we have the RAG status on there, and it's quite useful in terms of knowing sort of how progressed they are, but it doesn't give us the detail of what the challenges have been or where we could move forward or where the unblockers are that we could work with you, as you say, as a cross-party basis to sort of prioritise these different areas. And in terms of prioritisation numbers, many of those are in the sort of 1 to 5, presuming 1 is the most important or 5 is the most important. So again, just to clarify that really, and to understand as we're being able to read this report as effectively as we can as a scrutiny committee, I think it would be useful to have a bit more detail around those RAG ratings so that we can discuss where we can support that going forward.
Thank you very much. Before you respond, Vern, I'm going to take Hardiel for his comments, and then if you can come back on both of those, and then I'll take Lucy. We'll have a number of, questions on this. Thank you very much. Hardiel?
Just following on from some of the comments that you've made, Councillor, yeah, I mean, the red rag rating, there's next to them also is a costings column where it says there's quite a few with to be confirmed. So it'd be helpful to clarify what the challenges and barriers are and how they're going to be overcome, because I'm not sure I've read it within the report. And one of them, I'm thinking under street lighting, for example, there's a red category for 1.4F, which is £2.2 million is the cost. So, really understanding what that is, because is that because we don't have the funds, or procure them going to be a challenge? And in terms of procurement, the last category, I think they're all red. Again, it would be helpful to understand why that is. So it builds on what was in the first question and comments, just that detail, and there are quite a large number of reds, and there are many to be confirmed costs and implications. So some sort of clarification on that would be helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Hardle. Yeah, if you want to come back, Werner, on the two members' comments. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I guess it really, it sort of, it exemplifies where we are with the plan and its status at the moment. So I see this as being one of the sort of next phases of the plan, that we sit down and look at it as a whole, and then really start to get into the detail of where these priorities sort of sit, because it's very much been, we've very much seen this through the key action groups, and so for me this is around, I don't know if you've got anything to add particularly, Andy, but for me this is around the next phase of how we work the action plan.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we were asked last time to sort of consider a bit more about the resourcing of the individual actions. And bearing in mind this action plan's got something like 100 projects within it. So there are a few gaps still, and we try to get as complete a version as we could to you on time. But basically the red is, and this is coming from someone that's colourblind, the red indicates that there are no resources for that project at the moment. And what I mean by resources is either people or money. Green is obviously fully resourced, and amber is partly resourced. And we just wanted to give an indication of the level of ambition within this document, because we could have kept it really safe and just included all greens in the document, but that's not the level of ambition that's required for climate change and to moving forward in this area. So it is a bit awkward, a bit uncomfortable that we have some reds in there that are top priority. And just to answer that question as well, it should have stated that priority 1 is high, priority 5 is low. So apologies for that. So sometimes you can get a red status with no resource, but it's high priority, and we need to do it somehow. But the next stage, like Werner said, is to think how we can bridge that gap. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Andy and Werner. Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. And I start by saying that I saw the previous draft of this, and I think this is a really significant improvement on what was there. I might have come a couple of months earlier to Cabinet. This is much more practical. It's much more honest. I agree with you. I think it's a lot more honest, and I think it's a lot more self-congratulatory, which I don't think we're yet in a position to be. So I very much welcome this version. However, there are still things, and I think the points that have been raised about the need to deliver something as a really high priority, but yet we've got no funding for it, and other things that might be lower priority we have got funding for. I think that sort of prioritisation and changes within the Council's work programme will work through over the next probably 12 months, 2 years, so that this priority of this project and the assessment of these items will more align with the other projects that we're putting forward as a Council. That is certainly my hope. I think some of the priorities here aren't as good as they could be. So, for example, commissioning energy surveys to identify, this is 1.1e, to identify potential energy-saving projects is only as a priority 3. But unless we've done that work, we won't know where we need to put the money in. And that is particularly important because in the introduction to this, we, I think, very rightly highlight as one of the priorities to those actions as being target. What will give us the biggest carbon impact in the shortest time, because that is what we need to do. But if we haven't done the studies to look at our buildings, we won't know where to put the money to be able to make the greatest savings. So there's clearly still detailed work that's needed to be done on this. I hope that there'll be another version out within the year. And part of that, I hope, will pick up not just those points that I've mentioned. I hope it will reduce the priority given to carbon offsetting, which I think is should be a very low down our list. It needs to look at our IT. This doesn't seem to address how people use our IT. And for a good, well-designed, low-energy website, we're not actually reducing our energy usage, but we're reducing the usage of IT resources across the globe. So it's the amount of server time it takes for people to access the website. We need to separate, and I think this is important, and this needs to be made more of now, the difference between biodiversity and climate actions. They're both important. One is not below the other, but this is supposed to be the climate action plan, not the biodiversity action plan, and we need to separate that out in some way. And the other thing that this doesn't say enough about is the role the council has to enable other organisations and people within the city to reduce their carbon footprints. And this is where action within our roles as planners and transport planners and operators of the highway need to be brought out. It's not our footprint, but it's actions that we absolutely need to take to enable the carbon footprint of the city to be reduced. And those need to be priority actions now, not for our sake, but for the sake of the whole city and the world. They're mentioned in here, but it's not really drawn out that there are these two separate roles that the council has in terms of an action plan. In terms of the prioritising I've mentioned, one of the things we need to look at is things we act now that means that we can save in the future. Because if we put in, for example, a new gas boiler now, which is going to have a lifetime of 15 years, and in practice will probably last 20 years, that will take us beyond the point where we should have become zero carbon. So the investment now is not being maximised because we will have to have removed it before the end of its lifetime if we're going to achieve that zero carbon target in only 18 years. 13 years, only 13 years' time. The next iteration of the plan, I hope, will say more about partners that we need to work actively in, for example, with Western Power Distribution, to be able to deliver the aspirations in here about the use of renewables, and that should include the capacity for doing charging and for power storage, as well as just putting renewables into the grid. We need to say more about the staff role, and I really appreciate the learning and the teamwork that's already happening, but there will be more and more needed for that as people become more aware. And people need to feel enabled to say, I've done this training, and because of that, I can now see within my role we should be doing things differently. And managers need to be very open to having those suggestions and conversations with more junior members of staff. And we need to look further at the role that our customers and residents have when accessing services, and how we can minimise their footprints in using our services, not just within the IT sector, but within other ways as well. So I'm really pleased it's here. I'm pleased we've got it as good as it is. It is still a work in progress, and I do have a recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Lucy. I'm sure officers they've been busy making notes and taking that on board, and wherever they can take the part that they will try to do. I notice in this 4.4 there are some very welcome measures here about, and this touched on what you were mentioning earlier, external war installation programme, Mackworth, Allington, Chaddesden, improving energy efficiency for our council homes. I'd want to see that go wider if and when we can. Talks about the rollout of smart meters. I'm a little bit suspicious of smart meters at the moment because they're not that smart. And I have numerous people who have problems with them, and I'm resisting having one myself at the moment. But there's work that needs to be done by the industry, I believe.
They're getting better.
Yeah, to make those smarter. I do like the idea of the retrofitting air source heat pumps when replacing gas central heating boiling council homes that are well insulated. So there are a number of good measures. But you say there are other things that we need to be doing, Lucy, and officers taking that on board. So thank you very much for that. If there's no more comments. A recommendation, Lucy? Yes, please.
Thank you. And I've just pulled out a couple of so things in this rather than all that plethora. So I'm just saying Executive Scrutiny welcomes the Climate Change Action Plan in general and asks that as part of the final editorial changes to be agreed, there is greater clarity about the separation of climate and biodiversity actions, which are both important but different, and to give more emphasis to actions that the Council needs to take to enable everyone in the city to reduce their carbon footprints, including within planning and transport.
Second that, Lucy. Any more comments, or can we go to the vote? Can we go to the vote? Those in favour, please show. Unanimous. That's really good. So on that positive note, officers are okay with that. That's great. Moving on now to item 11 on the agenda. This is about the Humber River Basin Flood Risk Management Plan. Werner,
It's
over
me
to you
again, Chair.
Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. This report recommends approval of the Humber River Basin Flood Risk Management Plan, and specifically those measures relating to Derby, which are set out in 4.7, and to delegate responsibility for the final signing of the document. We have to develop flood risk management plans for our flood risk areas, and we have 2 flood risk areas in Derby, one for river and one for surface flooding. I appreciate flooding is quite an emotive word, but we've been working with the Environment Agency on this to develop our plan, as have the other lead local flood agencies within the Humber Basin. And I appreciate you might think, oh, the Humber Basin, that's miles away. But what the EA does, so the Environment Agency works across that much bigger basin scale. It covers about 36 different lead local flood authorities, from the North Yorkshire Moors in the north to Birmingham in the south, from the Pennines in the west to the North Sea. It's got about 15 different river catchments, so you can see it's how all that fits together. So, but working with them has really enabled us to benefit from their skills and knowledge, as well as ensuring we have a coherent plan with our neighbouring areas, and that we can use their collective powers in consultation and engagement. The Derby-specific actions fit our own flood risk management strategy, which is, as I said, those are set out in 4.7, and some of the measures are carried over from the last flood risk management plan. Others have been developed in meetings with the EA, and particularly things like the asset management life cycle planning, and those are things where there's a real national drive to separate off things like highway sewers sewerage that comes from residential from the drain off of rainwaters that goes through the highway process. So there's all those sorts of national and local priorities involved in this. We are undertaking some of those actions through our flood defence capital strategy, but other actions generally in this plan require us to explore and assess future schemes, including resources. So we have to report annually to the Environment Agency on our progress, and they report then to the regional flood and coastal committees, and it's those committees that oversee the plan overall. And we need to formally approve a sign-off of the flood risk management plan, and so that delegation is included in the recommendations, as I've said. And that's it, really, Chair.
Thank you, Werner. I know it's a long shot, but I'd like, under 4.5 and then 7.1 to 7.3, my own area, the Darley Mills Bridge, as we know, which is closed at the present time. Is there any way that we corporately can be looking at the Environment Agency to try to help finance the replacement of that bridge, which is, I know there's going to be a legal probably battle going on for probably up to 10 years, but something needs to be done in the short and medium term to either repair and reopen the existing bridge or get a replacement bridge in. We've got the Crown Estates and we've got the government saying not touching it. And it looks as though, and I think it was accepted by the CEO, that Derby City Council, at least in the short term, is going to have to probably come up with something to do the interim, short-term, medium-term work. Hopefully discussions will be going on with the Environment Agency, because with autumn coming up and winter, we could have a situation where those floodgates close on Haslam's Lane, and people who live in that mill area and Folly Road could be left not high and dry, but wet and worried, because there'll be no other way of escape. So there is an urgency to it, and I know the council is aware of that, doing all that it can, in fairness, with great difficulty. But I think this might be one area of funding that we ought to be looking at if we're not already doing that. Thank you, Werner.
Yes, Councillor Repton, as you and your fellow ward councillors have been deeply involved in the bridge. I mean, it wouldn't relate to this plan because this is something quite different around the Humber Basin. So, but as you know, there are ongoing conversations. From the flood risk point of view, obviously we work closely with the emergency planning team, so that requires us a multi-dimensional approach. My understanding is that there will soon be a multi-agency meeting, which will include the Environment Agency, ourselves, Derbyshire, Severn Trent, etc. So we'll be looking at that in the round. So that's all I know at the moment.
May I just start by saying I think we ought to apply for some Arts Council funding for the bridge, and we'll have a really exciting, imaginative feature there, which is absolutely required for the World Heritage Site, and that might get around some of these other issues. People may not have explored that one yet. But I was actually going to ask the Chair about a couple of other things. Firstly, that the importance, as the Chair has alluded to, of keeping local people and councillors informed in schemes in their area. It is mentioned, but I think we need to flesh out what that mechanism is going to be, because people like to know what's happening, and can we make sure that there's some sort of action plan or similar to make sure that people don't just come along and say, well, what are they doing over there? Why is that road closed? Or whatever it might be, without the right signage. When we did the works, the major works through the middle of Derby, or must be 15, 20 years ago now, for the Mark Eaton Brook, we had really good signage there to tell people what was going on and explain the projects, and I think people appreciated knowing what was being done. And alongside that, there is talk in 4.5, the third bullet point, which this expands on, which is the education engagement of communities to the awareness of flood risk. So it's part of the same public engagement issue. But what are we actually doing? Many of these areas that we're talking about, I've mislaid that paragraph, the high-rooted ones in Bramble Brook, Cotton Brook, Little Over Brook, a lot of those are on that south-west side of the city, but I'm not aware of any information that's coming out about sort of that awareness raising for local residents. And if I'm not aware of it, then a lot of other people won't be aware of it either. It would have been nice to have had a map with this report, which could have highlighted these areas that we're talking about. I think it's a really exciting topic, by the way.
Oh, right, okay. Werner, thank you.
Yeah, there is a map on the Environment Agency site, so you see the whole of the Humber Basin. It's very impressive.
Oh, Andy's still on. That might be the problem. The full report that we've submitted is referenced in the document, but it isn't included in the papers for the meeting. There might well be a map within that document, but it wasn't here. So if there's a way we can add it to the papers for posterity, that would be useful.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This item relates to alternative proposals for the development of the former Ada Bliss site on City Road. The proposals are to redevelop the site to provide stunt training, film studio and fitness rehabilitation facilities, an investment estimated around something like £30 million by Marv, which is a film production company behind the likes of the Kingsman series, Rocket Man, etc. There is also a strong local connection in Damien Walters, who is a Derby-based leading film stuntman, who also runs the Derby Gymnastics Club on Chapel Street. Clearly, a project of this nature will bring some significant economic benefits to the city, estimated by Focus Consultants at about £12 million a year. And obviously, there's lots of dimensions to that, including the local employment potential, increased use of hotels, restaurants, etc. in the city. And clearly, this is a significant opportunity to diversify Derby's economy as well from our traditional manufacturing base. It also, of course, brings this long-standing redundant site back into economic use, which is clearly a big positive. We recognise, of course, as the report covers, the option for the housing scheme, which has been consulted on with the local community. That scheme is a relatively expensive scheme, given the nature of the site in terms of it being sort of in an area of flood risk, etc. So the abnormals on that site do make it more expensive for a housing scheme. Clearly, this scheme is a private investment scheme, not the council investing in the site. The site currently sits in our housing revenue account, and the rules associated with that are that if we deem it to be surplus requirements, we still have to sell it at full market value, which is estimated now at £453,000, which is less than the £600,000 we originally purchased it for, because part of the site, of course, has been used for the flood protection works that were implemented. We are proposing in the report to provide a modest level of grant support to the scheme, certainly modest relative to the overall investment. We have set out in the report the financial implications for both the HRA and the general fund, and there are some conditions that would be associated with the sale if we were to proceed, and they include, of course, planning consent, a clause around buyback at the same value should the scheme not proceed, and also our support being conditional on delivery of all three elements of the proposal. There has been quite a bit of local engagement. We're aware that obviously there was a detailed consultation on the housing scheme, so we were anxious to make sure there was an opportunity for local residents to make their views known around this option. We did brief, as you know, Chair, the ward councillors, and we also arranged a couple of sessions for local residents to drop in and see the proposals, with the architect having produced some visuals, etc. And I have to say, encouragingly, the feedback was unanimously supportive of the proposals, and this is seen as a very positive use, an exciting use of the site by the local residents. So that's obviously very encouraging. So there's obviously a number of recommendations in terms of we would need to declare the site surplus to the council's requirements, and we would have to obviously dispose of the site based on the heads of terms with those conditions that I've touched on, and then obviously there are delegated authorities there in terms of finalising the contractual matters and the terms of the sale, and of course ensuring that we account properly for the financial implications between the HRA and the general fund. So yes, as I say, this is an alternative proposal for the development of the former Ada Bliss site. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I've been briefed on these proposals, as my fellow councillors have, and I must confess to the excitement that I and my fellow councillors, which is shared by the vast majority of local people, to these proposals, which would put Derby not only on the map nationally but internationally. I think there's only one or two other sites. One is in Los Angeles, and I think this is going to be one here in Derby. As you see from the proposals, we're talking about many jobs being created, about an initial potential £12 million investment, and then yearly worth of investments to the city of £12 million. This shouldn't be underestimated, and I think the knock-on effect that it could be, we could almost have an attraction for other media-related facilities here and at the university because of this. And I think it's an opportunity that this city and this committee shouldn't miss out on. We've already likened it to, you can forget Hollywood, we're going to have Darleywood here in this city. And there's genuine excitement. And so I will be making a recommendation that we wholeheartedly endorse these proposals, and that if possible, Cabinet fast-track these so the company get on site. We mustn't lose out on this opportunity, and we must grab it with both hands. I think there's loads to be gained from this. And who knows, we could have A-list celebrities strutting their stuff down City Road in the very near future. And we could even have David acting as a body double for Mel Gibson or others. So there's plenty of opportunities for local people, I understand, both to share and enjoy the facilities, but also to take part in it as well. So very exciting plans, and hopefully plans that will grab with both hands. Thank you, Chair. Hardiel.
Yeah, I'd be happy to second the encouraging the Cabinet and the Council to speedily seize this opportunity. I think we've talked about ambition for the city in the past, and here's a golden opportunity to make that ambition happen in the media world and sort of entertainment world, and become an international Derbywood rather than Darleywood, I would say. So I think it is a golden opportunity, and as you say, it can be the sort of opening the door for other interested groups to be coming here and create a sort of inertia to sort of get more and more investment, more and more state-of-the-art international facilities in Derby. So I think it's a welcome sight. There are obviously glitches in terms of the housing developments, and I think you've the officers identified all those and how they're going to be worked through, and it's important that we do that properly. But here's a great opportunity. Let's seize it and let's get it happening in Derby for future generations and for our economy and our cultural life.
Yeah, just before I take any more people, I must mention about the housing aspect. I know my members, and I hope the rest of this committee, we recognise and totally in favour of creating family houses. My concerns, and a lot of local people's concerns, here we had a listed wall of the old factory and the river, and they were trying to cram in 75 units into a heavily polluted site. I always had reservations that this wasn't necessarily the best site for housing units or apartments. We've got thousands of apartments in the city centre, and rightly so, and there's a need for them. What we're in desperate need of is family housing. And I hope that if and when this is accepted, that it doesn't stop our urgency in finding those sites and their ability to build those family homes, not just housing units, that we desperately need. And I, for one, and my group, and I know others here on this committee, will be supporting that. Anybody else wish to contribute? Councillor Ralston.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that note, I think my concern really is financially around the 9.6 element here, the grant that has been received for the 825,000 and the implications that it has, whether that is on the HRA finances or the City Council, and obviously the abortive costs around this. Absolutely, it was the right thing to do to look at housing on that estate in the interim, whilst, if there was no other opportunities for it, and I absolutely endorse the current proposals coming forward. I think it's a fantastic idea. It's something that's been mentioned over a number of years, and it's nice to see something like this coming hopefully into fruition as soon as possible. But just really to request a bit of a confirmation around those grants and the implications it has on the City Council going forward, and if those grants have been spent based to get it to this point already on the HRA, or if that is an additional element that would still have to be returned.
Thank you, Councillor Ralston. David, can you help us with that or get the information for us, please?
Yes, absolutely. So, first of all, in terms of the abortive costs, I suppose the key point to make here is we're not ducking the fact that there are abortive costs. Obviously, we've tried to be very transparent in terms of that. I think the other point to make is, as we sit here now, if this proposal isn't supported, it doesn't necessarily guarantee the housing scheme will proceed either. So those abortive costs are not really attributable to this option. They are attributable to the housing scheme if that doesn't proceed. So we're obviously trying to be transparent at this stage that if the MARB proposals proceed, clearly the housing scheme doesn't proceed. But there may be circumstances, even if this wasn't approved, where the housing scheme doesn't proceed and those abortive costs would still have to be borne by the HRA. In terms of the grant, that obviously is a grant that we had secured in relation to the potential of developing housing on this site, and as it states in the report, we are trying at the moment to see if that grant can be diverted to an alternative site. We're very conscious, Councillor Webb is regularly reminding me of the fact that we do need sites to provide the housing, as the Chair has highlighted, and we are obviously actively seeking alternative sites to provide equivalent numbers to the units that would have been provided on this site. But this, as we stand here now, the housing option is deliverable, but it's a very, very expensive option and not necessarily the best use of the council's resources in terms of financially. So I think in the round, there are some implications financially with these proposals being approved. I think relative to the investment the private sector is proposing, and to be fair, also reflecting, it's a qualitative thing, but reflecting on the feedback from the local community, I think it's clear certainly which option they would prefer to see proceed.
David's absolutely right, the overwhelming support. I mean, I was at those meetings and spoken to other people, and you don't have to go on social media again. The 100 odd likes, sort of all the stuff there's been about this on each post that's put up, and I think there's probably 99%, plus supportive of it. But it comes back to the point: housing is needed, family homes are needed, not necessarily apartments, and that site was very difficult, heavily polluted, and possibly, in retrospect, perhaps not the best site. Any other comments before we move on? Because I'll put the recommendation then to committee. Executive Scrutiny welcomes these exciting proposals and hopes they can, if possible, be fast-tracked through the system so the company can get on site and create these facilities as soon as is possible, which is what local people wish to occur. I think Hardy would like to second that. Can we move straight to the vote, please? Those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you, David. Okay, moving on. We have compliance and contract financial procedure rules. Alison, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's a regular report that comes to Cabinet. There are 4 items on the report for this period. The first one is in relation to some additional funding that's been secured by our adult learning service, £1.3 million worth of funding over 3 academic years. That's starting from September of this year. This fund is in relation to the Derby Multiplier project, which will be delivered and focused to improve the maths confidence and skills of Derby citizens. And you can see in 4.1.4 of the report the 3 areas that this fund will be prioritising. The first is around life skills, and it's addressing the cost of living crisis and working with partnership with the VCS organisations to deliver training, valuable training to our residents. The second is around employability skills and working with local employers to improve the maths skills for Derby residents to ensure that they have the confidence to understand the maths relevant to their employment. And the third item is around progression to level 2 maths where relevant. So the report is recommending to approve the acceptance of the funding of £1.3 million and also to delegate the relevant delegations to enable the council to apply the grant funding in accordance with the grant terms and conditions. The second item on the report is a commercial project in relation to a procurement approach around digital billboards on our estate, and approval is being sought to undertake a flexible procurement approach in order to progress this. A flexible procurement approach would invite outdoor media agencies to express interest in developing a large format digital advertising within Derby. And where it's agreed, the council would receive a guaranteed rent amount for each site, and all associated costs would lie with the media agencies. There's some good evidence of some sound practice out there in terms of other local authorities that have made some commercial gains in this area, and we feel that this is something that we should consider as part of our commercial activity approach. You can see the financial benefits in relation to this in detail in paragraph 4.2.7, and just to reassure Scrutiny Board that there would be a number of pre-application checks before agreement or a contract is established, and also all applications would go through the council's full planning process. So the recommendation of the report is to approve the flexible procurement approach, and also to approve the length of the legal agreements for each site of advertising to be 15 years. The third item of the report is in relation to a grant, £750,000 that has been received from the Museum Estate and Development Fund, the MEND Fund, and that's administered by the Arts Council. Just to note that Cabinet did approve a bid application to the MEND Fund in October of 21 this year, and this report is to recommend the acceptance of that award. We were successful in that bid and have been awarded £750,000, and that will enable us to do some focused and urgent roofing and replacement works on the museum and art gallery. So the report is recommending to accept the award of the grant, £750,000, but also to recommend to approve a legal charge being placed on the museum and art gallery building, and that's a condition of the grant to protect the grant funding agency, and it placed restrictions on a title over the freehold of the project asset. And the final element of this report is in relation to the Kingsway Roundabout. A solution has been found that provides direct links for pedestrians and cyclists over the A5 111, and in consultation and negotiations with Homes England and Tiller Homes, we've agreed that there's a scheme that reflects of that work of around £600,000. We've been awarded some Section 278 funding of £544,000, and the remaining of the scheme will be funded from the existing Highways and Transport Capital Programme. So the recommendation in the report is to approve a contribution of the scheme from those funding sources, and to add the scheme onto the capital programme, £600,000 for the Kingsway Roundabout scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Alison, before I say anybody else, 4.4 Kingsway Roundabout. I remember executive scrutiny many months ago, and Cabinet agreed to my request to convene a meeting between the owners of the retail site, the Highways Agency, the City Council and others, to look at the problems that many thousands of people were having exiting that retail site, as we know that hundreds of people were stuck for many hours at a time, a number of times a year. And I wonder, A, has that happened? And B, if it hasn't happened, why? And C, sort of, depending on those questions, then we might want to make a recommendation to Cabinet. Well, I certainly would want to do. So can you feed back, please, Werner?
It's a good job I stayed, isn't it? Almost that I knew you might ask me this. Yes, Chair, totally understand and fully aware of the recommendation that you made last time. No, the meeting hasn't happened yet, because we believe the best way to engage the owners is through this project. So as we take this project forward and explain why we are developing the needs of the planning requirement in its original form, that we have the pedestrian crossing, and therefore to see the benefits for their retail park as well as the housing as that's come forward, then we intend to engage with them through this project, using that as our lever.
I don't want to be awkward, Werner, but that was the democratic will. We are elected to make decisions. Elected councils made decisions, and councillors and officers were instructed, both by this committee and by Cabinet, to arrange that meeting. I understand, to a certain extent, well, this is probably the best, and I know that our colleague will jump in and say, well, we are going to comply with it. It's just about delay, and it's about getting it right. But the reason I raise that, and I know that John will come in, because being a councillor for Mackworth, But we cannot have a situation as we approach Christmas, and it always comes around very quickly, where we have a repeat of this, and people will rightly ask, well, you made a decision 6 months ago. You were going to meet with the owners of the site and Highways England, you're going to look at what's happening about A38 and can you combine it with that, and nothing's happened. So I'll just raise it now, whilst we're in June, rather than jumping up and down as councillors will if we get to November and this hasn't been resolved, Werner. So it's just so you understand the feeling that there is. Let me bring John in, then you can come back, Werner.
Slightly different question. I was going to ask if we go ahead and do all this, all the works on the Kingsway Island relatively soon, are we going to have to redo any of it? If and when, I mean, it's a massive if, I accept now, if we ever get the Highways England scheme for the A38, which has been, what, 10 years waiting to do nothing, basically. But, you know, if it's ever done with the 2 islands at Kingsway and this island at Kingsway, are we going to need to redo a lot of this work?
No is the answer, because this is just the pedestrian access between the new housing site and the retail park. So it won't impact on the islands further down, and we will obviously work with national highways should that. I mean, we won't know whether the A38 project is going ahead at the moment. So, but we will work with them if it comes to that. But no, I don't see that should make any difference.
I think what I'll do is I'm going to make a recommendation. It's because it's important that Cabinet, and I want to be helpful, to get this out into the open tomorrow night, so we can say to the public exactly what's happening. So my recommendation will be that Cabinet give a public update when discussions regarding the Kingsway Island will take place, and what action we may see or what we hope to see following such a meeting. So that gives the opportunity for me to speak tomorrow night, and for Cabinet then to get out into the public domain about exactly what's happening. And I think that's in everybody's interests. So could I have a seconder for that, please? Yeah. Anybody want to comment to it, or shall we go straight to the vote? Okay, straight to the vote then. Those in favour, please show. Oh, sorry.
To make the point, Chairman, is in terms of understanding the context of the issues on the Kingsway Retail Park, in that the Council, as the Highways Authority, has no authority over the use of the space, and we are trying to use whatever levers we've got to try and get those owners to work with us in a positive way. I also understand that historically there have been a range of conversations through politicians and with the owners of the site trying to find solutions, and that has not proved successful. So really what we're trying to do is translating that wish from Executive Scrutiny and Cabinet to find the best way we can use our influences to get them to come to the table to try and make some changes happen for our residents.
That's great. I said we'll still go to the vote on it. Those in favour, please show. No, I'm going to go to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. I think it's important. The reason that I've suggested that and we've voted for that, I think it gives the Cabinet the opportunity to reassure the public, because otherwise they'll think we don't do anything or we don't really care. And I know that's not the case. It gives that opportunity. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Werner. Lucy.
Chair, what I would like to have had included in that, but we can do it as a separate thing, which might be better actually, is as part of our engagement with the owners of that site, I think that we, as the planning authority, ought to be offering them something, and that something would be pedestrian access, helping with them to achieve pedestrian access onto the Kingsway site from other directions. And it is practical to have access through from, what's it called, Slack Lane in Mackworth, John? Yeah, there's through the park. People scrabble up that way. There is some access already. Yeah, it's... You can walk through. Yeah, you can walk through along from Brackensdale Avenue, bottom of Brackensdale Avenue, but you can also get up a really scruffy bit from the back of the park to the corner by where B&Q used to be, and it's now near Costa. There's also potentially access through from the end of Roditch Avenue, I think, but these access which gets you into one of the back car parks. So there could be potential to take some of those road trips off by creating access for other routes. And this is what I would like us to be offering, to work with them as the landowners to facilitate, to be able to help show that we will work with you to achieve something that's going to be better for you and your operators, your retail operators in that area. As well as in exchange, we want them to work with us on the road access and also improve disabled access, which is really poor in that area. So, Chair, I think we ought to do a recommendation. If we're going to pick up the recommendation on that point, I think this is the opportunity when we also need to pick up that recommendation again to empower officers to do a bit more for that chaos and the retail side.
What I'm going to do, Lucy, I'm going to ask Werner to incorporate that as a request that we actually look at that. I mean, again, I don't want to play party politics with it, so I don't want to commit the council to expenditure it either can't or doesn't want to do, but I think it's right that we explore all these opportunities to make it easier for pedestrian access. So Werner's making a note now, and she'll pick that up, and we can discuss that tomorrow night at Cabinet. But thank you for raising it, Lucy. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, any more comments or... Okay, sure.
Sorry, Chair. So I was saying that it would be nice to have had the full background papers provided for this as well, including the plan for Kingsway. But I was wanting to talk about the large format digital advertising thing, which is clearly, we know that big screens have a carbon footprint, and indeed it is referenced in the carbon implications at the end of the report. But all it says is that any procurement exercise the Council does will take into account climate implications in the specification and the process. Now, the Council has a new climate impact assessment tool, which it's going to move to expecting all significant projects to be considered through. And this, which has a clear carbon footprint implication, I think ought to have gone through that tool before it came to this meeting, because that tool is now up and running. So I have a recommendation asking that we actually ask that scheme to utilise that tool and come back, be postponed until Cabinet can have the outcome of that assessment, because it's there for that purpose. So I'm suggesting that executive scrutiny is disappointed in the narrow climate change implications comments related to the large format digital advertising boards, for which the contract would extend to when the Council intends to be zero carbon, which we have just been talking about earlier at this meeting, obviously. It asks the decision to be deferred until further work to be done on this project with the climate change team, including use of the climate impact assessment tool.
I'm a little confused, Chair. Is Councillor Kerr suggesting we go back to blackboard and chalk or something? You know, you know.
I'm disappointed, Chair, because I'm not suggesting that we go back to blackboards and chalk, and I think that was a cheap comment. It's because we actually need to be thinking about the implications for how to be zero carbon in 13 years' time, which is beyond the extent of the project. Would people support a recommendation which suggests that the project time should be less than 15 years, given that we're supposed to be zero carbon by then?
I think you will get some support on that. So we'll have a seconder from John. But in fairness, Lucy, you do make an important point, and I think Werner's taken that on board, the concern about that, about the issues that Lucy raises, whether we can try and mitigate against those at all. I don't know if we can or not, but if we could have a look at that, Werner. Okay. We do have a seconder from John. Anybody wish to speak on that, or do you want to go straight to the vote? Matt.
I'll contribute in a little bit more productive way, but I did want to make that point. I think it would be prudent to, and I'm sure officers are aware of this, the technology that we're going to purchase and use for this project needs to be energy efficient. I'm sure it will be. It needs to be as high rating as possible. So I'm sure it's there in the consideration, but maybe a recommendation to seek the highest possible energy efficiency standards in the technology that we adopt. And I think that would cover Councillor Kerr's, middle ground between what I've said and Councillor Kerr wants, I think.
That offers some reassurance, Matt, thank you. In terms of the second recommendation that Lucy made, Councillor Olsen.
Apologies, Chair. Whilst we're on the board. I wonder why they've been the income to the council has been put in millions, because ultimately, if I'm reading this correctly, it's £7,000 to £9,000 per annum. Is that correct?
Can we have some clarification, Werner, on that? Is it a typo? Who's best to answer this?
Yeah, that'd be me. So yeah,
Alison.
Yeah, it is £7,000 to £9,000 per annum for each board. Yes.
I suppose my challenge really is that a competitive rate in comparison to other authorities and what they're receiving from this, because ultimately it doesn't sound an awful lot in the grand scheme of the financial issues that we face as a council.
Yeah, well, that's per annum, so for each board, and we have done some extensive work alongside. You can see it's referenced Salford City Council and that, so it is comparable to those, but obviously, you know, we would leverage in the maximum amount that we could in terms of the marketability of those boards. So, you know, we would definitely have a commercial focus on that, but that is a benchmark with what other local authorities have been receiving for like displays.
Thank you, Alison. Okay, in terms of Lucy's second recommendation, that's about the time. Would you care to read that out, please, Lucy?
I now typed it. So, executive scrutiny is. Do you want me to say this? Perhaps you don't want this. The executive scrutiny is disappointed in the narrow climate change implications comments related to the large format digital advertising boards, for which the contract would extend to when the council intends to be zero carbon. It asks for the contract period to be limited to end in 2035, unless there is assurance that the operation of the boards will be zero carbon.
Are you happy with that, John, or do you not want Lucy to add in that extra bit that she smuggled in?
I'm happy with the most green we can go, to be honest.
Okay. All right. Those in favour, please indicate. Okay. Those against, please show. No, that's passed. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Right. Councillor Ralston.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on the other items within the report, just to welcome the DALS funding that's been agreed, and just to clarify really on the approach and the numbers of people we hope to target with that. I think it would be a fundamental issue that we can, you know, as Lucy referred to earlier, we've looked at many sticking plasters to help towards the cost of living issues that we're having, and this is ultimately a much more diverse way of looking at the approach to supporting residents within the city. So I just ask for more detail of what the sort of numbers we are hoping to get through as scrutinies and how we target the most in need, and making sure that those most in need of this support gathers that, if you like.
Yeah. Alison?
Yeah, Councillor Rawson, I don't have those specific numbers to hand, but I can arrange for a briefing to come to you from the head of service, Anna Mims.
Thanks, Alison, on that. Councillor Ralston.
Sorry, Chair. And the last, on another point with relation to the museums, there was some talk there regarding to the grants and a sort of charge, in theory, on the building itself. Just to clarify the implication for us as a council in terms of that, ultimately what I don't want to see is that the project becomes out of hand and can't be successful. So do we have a fundamental sort of funding backbone, if you like, for this to cover off any issues that we may have with it in the future?
Who's best to answer this? Steve.
Yeah, I do apologise, Councillor. I was reading my next paper. I apologise. Would you mind repeating the question? I'll try to.
So basically, just to the implications on the museum funding, if you like, and whether there are any concerns from a council perspective that should the museum not be able to commit any additional funds, or if the costs of the project, as we all are aware, may increase during the timescale, what the implications of the council are, and whether we do have to commit any funds to that in the background.
Right, sorry, I apologise. Yes. I've been working with Phil Derbyshire, who's leading on this. He was the one that successfully bid on the MEN fund. There is a MEN 2 fund as well. He's looking at possibility. He's not expecting any significant impact on our finances or contribution at present. He's more concerned about the timing of the projects and implications with anything else they're going to use the buildings for. But he has not highlighted to me any concerns regarding funding or contributions at the moment, and I have been talking to him regularly on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
I was going to add a bit to that, just to be clear, that obviously this is funding that's been obtained from Arts Council externally to help us maintain an asset that belongs to the council. So that the asset is our asset. So we would have to have done the work anyway. We've actually got additional funding to help us to pay for that by this funding.
Sure. Thanks very much, Rachel, for that. Thank you, Steve. Okay, right, very quickly, because we need to move on to the Rolls-Royce nuclear item. Lucy, have you got, was there something else we covered?
Sorry, Chair, it was just on the maths training scheme. I was wondering if there was a mechanism by which people could be guided towards it, how it was being publicised, because I certainly come across people who would benefit from that, but it would be nice to know how to direct them into it.
Who's best to answer that? Alison?
I'll arrange that in the briefing from Anna, because I don't have the details of the operational details of that scheme.
Thank you, Alison. That's great.
Maybe Chair to all councillors?
Sorry?
Could it go in one of our councillors' briefings?
Yeah, if we could, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Thanks, Lucy. Okay, thanks very much for that. Item 14, Derby Nuclear Skills Academy, Infinity Park. Rachel, are you taking us through this, or Steve, or both of you? Steve?
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, David.
Yeah,
David, thank you.
I've got a gallery of stars behind me who will fill in some of the detail. But what I thought I'd do is just give the high-level summary, and then particularly Steve and Tim have been involved in the liaison with the existing tenants at the iHub, which is clearly a matter which needs to be considered within the context of this proposal. So the wider background to this, as we know, is that there's been an aspiration for a long time on Infinity Park to create an ecosystem around technological innovation, and one of the first flagship projects in that regard is the Nuclear Advanced Manufacturing Research Park, which is now on site, facilitated by the City Council in conjunction with the LEP and other partners. And Andy Storer, the CEO of the Nuclear MRC, was always keen that wasn't the end of the story, that we'd actually then start to build a critical mass of activity across Infinity Park. This particular proposal, and of course this report is not a key decision, it is very much trying to surface the rapidly emerging proposals which relate to this opportunity. And obviously a further report would have to be brought to Cabinet when there are key decisions to be made. But the backdrop to this is a projected major increase in the skills needs for Rolls-Royce submarines. And as it states in the report, something of the order of 2,000 apprenticeships over a 10-year period. Partners behind this include central government in the form of BAYS, the Nuclear MRC that I've already mentioned, which is the University of Sheffield is the accountable body for that organisation, the National College for Nuclear, and the University of Derby as well. This in a sense is a huge opportunity to secure the credentials, if you like, for Derby to become one of the key centres of nuclear development in the future. The risk for us, if we weren't to secure this opportunity, is that would go elsewhere. Not obviously that necessarily Rolls-Royce submarines, but the opportunity to actually grow the critical mass of activity here in Derby certainly could be lost. And although it's not stated in the report, one of the options for this activity, this academy activity, would be for it to go to Rotherham in South Yorkshire, to the Advanced Manufacturing Park, where the nuclear MRC also have a site. Now, clearly, there's some challenges in this as well, because we're talking about transforming an existing council asset into this new use, and external funding was secured for the purposes of the iHub in its current form. And obviously, as I've already touched on, there are the logistics around the existing tenants and how we accommodate them elsewhere. It's interesting, and I'll let Tim and Steve kick in now, in the sense that when the engagement with the tenants was initiated, and the wider opportunity and consequences associated with this proposal was presented to those tenants, they were largely very supportive, because they could see this was an opportunity that Derby did not want to let slip by, because once the activity goes elsewhere, it probably goes elsewhere for good. So yes, some challenges. There's a challenge as well around the pace of this. Rolls-Royce, nuclear MRC, Bays, etc., very much foot on the gas, trying to get this over the line very, very quickly. And clearly we are in this, having to follow appropriate processes to make sure that there's, approvals in place for any arrangement we might need to enter into to make this happen. So if I could, Chair, could I just hand over to Tim and Steve just to give a little bit more background on the liaison with the tenants and how we're trying to facilitate as I say, the accommodation of those tenants elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. If you're happy for me to come in, because I see Councillor Harder put his... No? Okay. So perhaps if I can just support what David's been saying there, and not putting the gas on or pressing the nuclear button, but it has been incredibly well supported by the tenants. Let's be absolutely clear. We presented to them, and they absolutely understood the need and the opportunity that it represents for the city to be an absolute centre of educational excellence in this field. Highly supported by the tenants, many of whom are even in the supply chain for that industry, it's worth saying. That being said, of course, they are running their own businesses, and they need that continuity, and therefore we have already established a series of engagements with them, and when I say series, I mean absolutely every single day. Either Ambati or myself or even Tim or whoever have been engaging with all of the tenants. There are essentially two forms of tenants there. For those that are unfamiliar with the building, there are the office occupiers and then there are the workshop occupiers. So those engagements are very productive, they're ongoing, but they are not committed yet, because as David has pointed out, this is not a key decision. We need all the necessary data and information to then come back to the council, and working with our partners, that's the University of Derby, the University of Sheffield and Rolls-Royce, to come back with a definitive recommendation for members to consider. In terms of those tenants, you've probably already seen, it's in the media, there are 21 in total, however 9 of them are actually really postbox, they're virtual tenants, they use it as an address and so forth, the rest are obviously actual tenants, 2 of which of course are part of this project, being Rolls-Royce and NMRC themselves. Of those tenants, to be clear, all of the office occupiers have so far indicated a positive response to being rehoused within the Connect portfolio. As of today, we believe every single one of the office occupiers can be accommodated with their support into the existing portfolio. The workshop ones are more challenging, and we're going to be engaging with our partners on the project, Rolls-Royce and the University of Derby, to see how we can facilitate their needs as well. So that's the level of engagement that's been ongoing. Before perhaps I can allow Tim to come in, and some of you may not be familiar with Tim, obviously he's recently joined the council, so maybe an opportunity for you to meet him as well. Perhaps it would help members if I just explain the structure. So as it's been presented to us, and if I've got any of this wrong, I'm sure Tim will correct me because he's very close to it as well. Rolls-Royce effectively are the sponsor. They are the customer that will be paying for the education of the students and hoping to recruit them at the end of it. So they are, if you like, the customer at the end of it. The University of Derby, I believe, are kind of the education sponsor because it's obviously on their patch and it will be a satellite to University of Derby. But the courses will be run and provided by the University of Sheffield, who are the experts in this particular field. And obviously, Derby City Council own the asset, although to be clear, they don't own the freehold of the asset. The freehold is actually owned, ironically, by Rolls-Royce, and we're obviously working with them on getting those permissions in place to facilitate this, and I'm sure they'll be supportive. So I don't know if that helps a bit of the context of the setup and the engagement that is ongoing at present. We don't have definitive costs. That is obviously all being worked on. And there are other strains to that, including ICT infrastructure, transport, planning, and all those other elements essential to making this happen in September. And we are working very hard every day to try to do that. And there are at least 2 meetings a week with our partners on that. So hopefully that gives you members the context and the work, and I don't know if Tim has anything to add or wishes to introduce himself, but Tim's been great in supporting this project for us as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, these are very exciting proposals, and these proposals could and are hopefully the first step towards the realisation of exciting opportunities, not only for the 2,000 apprentices, but the whole of this city. So, yeah, let's hopefully let us see what transpires, but we wish them every success. Hardiel, I think you'd like to come in. Do you want to come back, Steve? Or?
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah,
I think Hardiel was suggesting Tim might be able to add something.
Yeah, Hardiel.
I thought Tim was going to round off the presentation.
Sorry. Okay, Tim.
Just a few quick things to add, really, in terms of what Steve was saying. Just to sort of clarify, the University of Derby will play the leading role in delivering the courses. So that's important to. That's important to. So the University of Derby will play the leading role in terms of delivering the courses, bringing in expertise from around the country, from the National College for Nuclear, also the University of Sheffield, but a mix of different providers will sort of come into the mix, as it were. Derby College as well. So that's sort of important. I think also important alongside, obviously, the immediately important issue of the tenants is how we actually get out and sell this to the city as well, of course, and how we talk to the city about this. And so Rolls-Royce are already out engaging with local schools, talking about the potential for the opportunity in the future over the next sort of 10 years of its initial delivery, but also keen to get out and engage different communities around the city just to ensure through the whole sort of communications process that as many people as possible are aware of these minimum probably 2,000 opportunities over the next 10 years. So just a little bit of addition really to what Steve's already said.
Thanks very much, Tim. Hardiel.
Thank you, Chair. And I think it's just really a no-brainer, this one, because I know it's not a key decision. It's a preliminary sort of alert of what potential that exists. We've got a global company in Rolls-Royce in aeronautics, and we have a significant base, nuclear base, submarine base here in Derby through Rolls-Royce as well. So I think this is a great opportunity, and we talked about ambition previously with the AWS facility. This is also another ambitious opportunity, and I think we need to take it forward as quickly as possible. I do note the officer's due diligence about the tenants who are in the iHub now, and I think we need to be assured and confirmed that the tenants, not just the workshop ones, but the others, are well accommodated, and any costs borne on that are part of the project in terms of the moving in. So I think we should support this. I think we should put a proposal to say we support the initial discussions and the opportunity to make Derby a nuclear academy, the only one in this country, and one of the significant ones in this country, and welcome the fact that this will mean 200 apprentice jobs per annum, at least for the next 10 years. And I think that's really important, and we should sort of do whatever we can to make sure the people in Derby City, not people coming from outside, which often happens with our large global organizations, people in Derby City are maximised in terms of opportunities to take up those apprenticeships, in particular, all our diverse communities. And I think we should sort of put that forward in support of this potential initiative that we need to land as quickly as possible to maintain our ambition for the city.
What I put forward is that a recommendation that Executive Scrutiny welcomes these proposals, and I can expand on that tomorrow evening in Cabinet. Would you be supportive of that? Hopefully you would. Could you indicate that those in favour of that, please show? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Hardiel. Lucy, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. The whole of the nuclear industry, I think, is a really interesting place to be. It has, in Derby, people think of it as being Rolls-Royce and the submarines. But there are a lot of medical processes that are absolutely vital to have the nuclear elements to it. And obviously there's lots of background technical things that are related as well. And on the engineering side, it's not just propelling a submarine, there's also a lot of work on non-destructive testing and aspects like that as well. And there are lots of things that no doubt could be done, which we are yet to discover. So I think it's really exciting. But a lot of the funding to support this is coming through from the public sector. And historically, the whole of the sort of nuclear industry side has been something that has blown hot and cold over the years. It was really big. The 1950s, everybody was fully into it. We were worried about it in the 1970s. It got quieter and drifted away. We didn't build any nuclear power stations, for example. We're now debating the role of nuclear as part of a low carbon. It may go one way, it might go the other way. There are still all those other needs that have got nothing to do with nuclear power and the other uses for nuclear technology. But if the funding isn't coming in, I just want to know whether someone's done the risk analysis and the assessments of this, that if there's a downturn, if within 5 years it becomes apparent that actually nuclear power isn't the way forward for a low carbon economy, which is the decision that Germany took, for example, what's the implication going to be for this project? And I just want to know if work's been done on that risk analysis.
Hopefully scale it up, but Steve or Tim, do you want to come back on that?
All I can say is, from what I've heard, is there is a minimum 10-year commitment to the education side of it. It is a global market for these nuclear engineers. It is not just literally here, that they will be providing potential experts globally, and therefore I suspect even if the UK's dependence or requirements may fluctuate, I suspect there will be more than capacity for at least the decade. And they talk very heavily about the nuclear submarine side of it and the civil requirements, and particularly smaller nuclear reactors as being a big opportunity. So I definitely, and I'm absolutely no expert whatsoever in this field, but I certainly feel convinced there is at least a decade of absolute certainty, but Tim's closer than me on it.
Yeah, I'll bring you in a minute. Yeah, with regard to the civil side, I think there's massive opportunities, as a layperson, massive opportunities, because I can see us moving towards where we'll need those reactors that you have on a nuclear submarine. Apparently, they can power, I think, is it 9,000 homes. So if we've got these apprentices here and we're doing work in that area, then I think there could be knock-on, I'm sure, for the civil nuclear side. There's plenty of opportunities that we'll be able to look at. Hardiel, then Tim. Sorry, John and Tim. John.
Chair. As we received the external funding for the iHub in the first place, obviously in the report it says that there may be some sort of clawback. What's the potential amount we might have to end up paying back for it?
I think we're hoping we won't have to pay any of it back. Steve and Tim may wish to comment, but I think the use here is largely compatible with what the funding sources were originally, because it will still contribute to the wider kind of, economic growth kind of outputs, if you like, that we were originally trying to achieve through that funding.
And the tenants, I presume some of these people would be like breach of contract or whatever on their current accommodation, whether they're positive about this or not. Presumably there'll be some sort of compensation.
No, Steve will want to comment on this, but I don't think they have the rights in the traditional sense of a tenant, do they, Steve?
Steve, to come in. Sorry,
my thing went green. I've not seen a green alarm on that. I was a bit worried it was going to explode. Sorry, Chair. The tenants have protected leases in the duration of their leases at the iHub, if that language makes any sense, i.e. they have a fixed term contract. They don't have monthly break clauses or what have you. So everyone we are engaging with is by negotiation. If they come to an end on September the 1st, then clearly they end on September the 1st. These are not protected tenancies under the landlord and tenant protection issues. So everything we are doing is by mutual agreement, consent and negotiation. I don't know if that helps you.
Thanks, Steve. Tim.
I was just going to make a small additional point in response to Councillor Kerr's question earlier on. So our opportunity really, well, obviously it's a great opportunity to support an existing strong Derby business, but our opportunity then on top of that is to build on this and sort of attract further nuclear investment into the city. But the initial this requirement for 2,000 is simply to support submarines activity.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
Okay.
Just wanted to say on Lucy's point about the wider advantage. I mean, I think having a nuclear academy in Derby should give us the knowledge base and the skills base to look at all the things, including nuclear fusion. Because I mean, it may not be, that's the future, and we need to be in the game. And having an academy here puts us in a good, strong position. So I think all the other opportunities that Councillor Kerr mentioned are there to be taken if we can land this.
Absolutely, Nigel. I think we're all in total agreement with that. The sky's the limit, I think, on that. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks very much for that. That's item 14. We now move into item 16 on the agenda. But before that, I have to do my announcement, which is it's about the exclusion of the press and the public, because these are the red papers. But hopefully, we'll only be a few minutes on these, so we'll just allow the press and the public to depart whilst we look at item 16, which is the pink confidential papers. Okay, and then we'll also go off